In this video, we're going to take a closer look at the Scalextric's McLaren F1 GTR. Welcome to Garage Sport, where we take a closer look at hobbies like slot car racing to make you an expert. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. There's a line of cars that we've got set up to review with a new video released every Thursday. In this video, we're looking at the Scalextric's McLaren F1 GTR, a car first released in 1994, turned into a slot car in 2018. Scalextric has a recommended retail price of, in terms of British pounds, $49.99. That's 94 Australian dollars at the time of making this video. You can probably find it a fair bit cheaper than that if you look around. I found this exact car for $72.95 at my local slot car shop, and I strongly encourage you all to support your local shop because they're the backbone of our hobby. This is the Papaya road-going version C4102 of the Scalextric's catalogue if you're a train spotter. What makes this car especially noteworthy is that it's arguably the most desirable road car ever made, certainly if you're a collector. This is the road-going version of the McLaren F1 GTR, a car designed by Gordon Murray, who was then pestered into making it into a racing car. It was stripped down and tweaked, though not as much as you perhaps think, and went on to have a very successful racing career, winning Le Mans. There was this version, and there was also a long-tail version that was introduced a year or two later. Now, there are about 30 of these things made all up, and only a small subset of those converted to road use, making them hugely desirable. If you want one, though, you're going to have to save the pennies and sink about $20 million, perhaps even more, and even then, you've got to find one. The McLaren F1 was a three-seater with a unique driving position at the center of the car. Of course, that's been recreated here with a figure at the wheel wearing a t-shirt and jacket because, of course, this is a road-going version, but that's really the only change over the other designs that Scalextric has produced of this car. Outwardly, the car is the same. It's just got a different color and it's devoid of the stickers that adorn a racing car. McLaren has licensed the design, so everything has been very faithfully recreated, from the color of the Papaya paint to the wheel design to the insignia dotted around the car. There are no glaring errors or issues. It's well created and well produced with a high level of attention to detail. Basically, there's nothing I can really fault externally. Underneath, it's all pretty standard too, a simple single-piece chassis as Scalextric tends to produce, with the body held on by 3 screws, 2 at the front and 1 at the back. The chassis isn't too restrictive for those that like to loosen the body off and get a little bit of float, so you shouldn't need to trim that down much, if at all, to get that little bit of wobble that you're after. Scalextric has something of a formula for its chassis, and those telltale signs are here once more. Up front, the guide is now the standard quick-swappable braid plate. Those racing on will probably want to swap that in the guide out with something a little bit deeper, but for the most part, this is fine. There are working lights on this car, so the wiring is a little bit more complex as it splits out to those, as well as feeding back to the inline motor, which is snapped into place. This is where the limitations of the Scalextric car really show over some of the other brands. I wouldn't want to be replacing the motor often in this car for fear of breaking or fatiguing the plastic that holds it in. There's a little bit of play, so if you're serious, you might want to glue the motor in, but for the most part, there's no real need to do that. Gearing-wise, it's all plastic or nylon, as is the norm with Scalextric. That feeds into the rear wheels, which are press-fit plastic, another signature cost reduction move. The rear axle is held in place by 2 plastic bushes, again, clipped into the one-piece plastic chassis, which same weaknesses as have the motor pod. They will fatigue over time if you're popping the axle in and out, something that can happen if you crash the thing too much, so just be wary of that, as again with all Scalextric cars. Real world racers will look to replace the motor, axle, gears, bushes, probably the wheels. They're all weak points on the car, and that's the case with any Scalextric car. It's not a criticism of the McLaren in particular, but it's by cutting those corners that, of course, Scalextric can make these cars as affordable as they are, even if the price has risen over the years to the point where they now find themselves flirting with sort of some more sophisticated brands on the market. A Revo slot McLaren F1 GTR is $114.95 Australian dollars at my local slot car shop, which is notably more expensive than what I got this one for. But if you look at the recommended retail price of close to $100, then it's not too far away. It's only about $20 difference. There you get an aluminium chassis, wheels, among a list of other parts that set the Revo slot McLaren apart. Now, I don't have one of those for a direct comparison. I do have other Revo slots in my collection, and I'm sure anyone who's driven one will agree they are just a better car. but they're also more expensive and they're less accessible to someone entering the hobby. And that's what's, that's the market that Scalextric is really looking at. It wants to appeal to the hardcore racers and the collectors, but at the same time, it operates on volume. That means it needs to be affordable to someone just getting into the hobby and appeal to them as well. And with that in mind, the McLaren is an excellent car. It's well presented, hardy as a typical Scalextric car is, accepting the high resistance stuff, and it goes well out of the box. There are things that can be done to improve that, like with any slot car, but if you're going to pick this up for about 75 Australian dollars, then you're not going to be doing too badly. But at recommended retail prices, you're better spending a few more dollars and grabbing the Revo slot. But talking aside, let's get this thing on track and see how it goes. A 5-lap blast to see just what the Scalextric McLaren F1 GTR is all about. Here we go then, 5 laps with the Scalextric McLaren F1 GTR around this 3-lane routed wooden track. Magnetic brakes, so the magnets will have an effect, but not much of one. You can already see the back end sliding. It's humid today. The track is slippery, even though it was cleaned before this 5-lap blast. Good traction. It handles well, but you can't drive it too deep into the corners, else the back does want to step out. A couple of quick changes of direction on this track. There's one. Look for the back end there. It's a really tricky corner. A complex to string together. Back end getting all over the shop as we finish this one. And so there it is, a 5.9 second lap. Well done on what I thought we would get out of this car, though. Looking at the tyres, I suggest they've probably seen better days. This car has been sitting on the shelf for a little while, so perhaps with a fresh set of boots, that time will come down. I would have expected somewhere in the mid 5 second range, but 5.9 seconds is our first time on the board for the Scalextric McLaren F1 GTR. That's it for this one. If you liked the video, do give it the thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. All of that stuff makes a huge difference. And stay tuned, we have plenty more coming up. Until next time, happy racing.